It is 11 o'clock at night on Friday, November 17th, 1978. In Speedway, Indiana, a quiet community folded into the western edge of Indianapolis, the work week is over and the town has settled into the ordinary rhythms of a late autumn evening. Porch lights glow through bare tree branches. The roads are mostly empty. Whatever tension this town has been holding since the pipe bombings of September has not fully released. But Friday night, at least, offers the illusion of calm. On Crawfordsville Road, the Burger Chef is in its final hour of operation. The dinner crowd left long ago. The parking lot, bright under its overhead lights, holds almost no cars. Inside, the fryers have cooled. The lobby chairs are up on the tables. The floor is half mopped. 4 people remain to finish the close. Jayne Friedt, 20 years old and the assistant manager, is the one responsible for locking up. She has done it before. She knows the routine. Beside her, 16-year-old Danny Davis wipes down the last of the counters, unhurried, thinking about the weekend ahead. Ruth Ellen Shelton, 17, works quietly near the back, moving through the tasks the way she does everything, without complaint, without fanfare. And then there's Mark Flemmonds. He is also 16, and he is here because he agreed, at some point earlier in the week, to cover a shift for a coworker. A small favor, the kind extended without calculation. His name was not on the original schedule. No one watching this restaurant from the outside would have known to expect him. In less than an hour, all 4 of them will be gone. Not home, not safe. Gone, in a way that will take 2 days to understand and 47 years to still not fully explain. Speedway, Indiana was not a town that expected violence. It was incorporated as its own municipality for one reason: to give the Indianapolis Motor Speedway its own legal identity, separate from Indianapolis, free from city jurisdiction and city taxes. For most of the year, it was quiet, familiar, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked because they had been doing it for decades and nothing had ever happened to make them stop. But 1978 had already taken something from Speedway before November arrived. Through September of that year, a series of pipe bombs had detonated across the community with no warning and no clear motive. 8 explosions, multiple people wounded. A man named Carl DeLong lost both legs. His wife was injured in the same blast. The bomber was never conclusively identified for years, leaving the town to absorb 8 acts of violence without the closure of a name, a face, or an explanation. By November, the bombs had stopped, but the town had not returned to what it was before September. The ease of a place where nothing bad happens does not come back simply because the bad thing has stopped. It has to be earned back, slowly, over time. November 17th, 1978 arrived before that time had come, and Speedway, still raw, still uncertain, was about to absorb something worse. The Burger Chef on Crawfordsville Road looked like every other Burger Chef in America. Orange and brown interior, laminate counters, the smell of fryer oil and cleaning product, a menu board above the registers, teenagers in paper hats taking orders from families who would not remember the visit by morning. In 1978, Burger Chef operated more than 600 locations across the United States. It had been there long enough to challenge McDonald's for market share. It had been the first major chain to introduce a packaged children's meal with a toy. It was, by any measure, a permanent fixture of American fast food culture. None of that matters to what happened on Crawfordsville Road. What matters is the back. Not the dining room, not the bright signage facing the street. The back of the building. A narrow service corridor between the rear wall and the tree line, where the dumpsters sat and where the trash went out at the end of every closing shift. That area was dark. It was hidden from passing traffic. It was used by 1 or 2 employees at a time, at roughly the same hour every night, as part of a closing routine that never varied. A routine someone had studied, a routine someone had timed, a routine someone was prepared to use. Brian Crane was 16 years old and he had come of his own accord. He worked at the Burger Chef. Nobody asked him to stop by. He pulled into the parking lot just after 11 p.m. because he knew his coworkers were closing and he thought they might want help getting out early. It was the kind of unremarkable gesture that passes between coworkers at closing time without anyone thinking twice about it. He walked to the back of the building. The service door was open, not broken, not forced, standing about 3 inches ajar as if someone had stepped through and not bothered to pull it shut. He went inside. The lights were all still on. The grills were still warm. Every cash register drawer had been pulled wide open and left that way. The safe stood open. Approximately $581 in cash was unaccounted for. And then, the details that could not be explained by a simple theft. Jayne Friedt's purse sat on the counter exactly where she had placed it. Ruth Shelton's coat remained on its hook by the back door. The mop leaned against the wall, still wet from recent use. People who rob a place and run do not leave their purses behind. They do not leave their coats. Brian called the police. Something was deeply wrong. The Speedway police arrived and surveyed the scene. They looked at the open registers, the missing cash, the unlocked door, and the absent employees, and they reached a conclusion. The teenagers had taken the money and gone out for the night. An inside theft. Irresponsible kids who would surface by Saturday morning, caught and embarrassed. That conclusion was not tested. It was assumed. And every decision that followed was built on top of it. The restaurant was not sealed. No forensic team was called. No photographs were taken of the counters, the floor, the register drawers, or the back entrance. The physical evidence, whatever fingerprints existed on those surfaces, whatever shoe impressions had been pressed into the mopped floor, whatever trace of any person who had been inside that building between 11 p.m. and Brian Crane's arrival, was left completely unprotected. Saturday morning, the opening crew arrived and did their jobs. They cleaned everything. The Burger Chef on Crawfordsville Road opened for business that Saturday, as if the previous night had been ordinary. And the one place in the world where the truth of what happened to 4 teenagers existed in physical form was wiped away with mops and cleaning cloths, before the investigation had taken a single step. Officer Buddy Ellwanger, assigned to the case years later, was unsparing. We screwed it up from the beginning. Saturday brought one new piece of information and no answers. Jayne Friedt's Chevrolet Vega was found parked just a few blocks from the restaurant, undamaged, partially locked. It had not been driven far, which told investigators either that whatever happened to these 4 people happened very close to the Burger Chef, or that they had been moved in someone else's vehicle. Jayne had not driven herself anywhere. By mid-morning, the families were calling. The FBI became involved. Search teams spread from Speedway in concentric arcs. Saturday passed without a single sighting, without a phone call from any of the 4, without any contact of any kind. The silence grew heavier with each hour. Sunday, November 19th, arrived gray and cold. A property owner in Johnson County, a rural area of southern Indiana, more than 20 miles from Crawfordsville Road, was walking a stretch of land he had walked many times before. Through a patch of trees, across a field, into a clearing he knew well. He found 4 people in that clearing. All 4 were wearing their Burger Chef uniforms, the orange and brown of a Friday night closing shift, the same clothes they had put on 2 days earlier, before the shift that would be their last. The medical examiner's findings were precise, and they were devastating. Danny Davis had been shot multiple times with a .38 caliber firearm. The wounds were to his head, neck, and shoulders. He had not been given the chance to run. Ruth Ellen Shelton had sustained the same injuries, the same caliber, the same locations on the body, the same absence of any opportunity to escape. Jayne Friedt had been stabbed twice in the chest. A different weapon, a different method, the same outcome. And Mark Flemmonds, the 16-year-old who was not supposed to be working that night, who had covered the shift as a favor, whose name was not on the original schedule, had died from severe blunt force trauma to the head. 4 people, 4 different causes of death, as if whoever was responsible had come equipped for each of them specifically, or had improvised with whatever was at hand once the situation required it. None of them had been given a way out. The deliberateness of that fact is what separates this from a robbery that escalated. This was not panic. This was not accident. 4 people had been taken from a restaurant and driven 20 miles into rural Indiana, and not one of them had been permitted to survive the night. The intention had been total. Investigators had no usable forensic evidence from the restaurant. What they had instead was people, witnesses who had been near the burger chef on the night of November 17th and might have seen something worth building a case from. One witness stepped forward with a memory that would shape the investigation for years. He was 16 years old, and he had been near the restaurant on the evening of the murders. He remembered 2 men sitting in a parked car in the burger chef lot. They had not gone inside. They had not used the drive-thru. They were simply parked and watching. Both were white males, appearing to be in their early to mid-30s. One had a beard. The other was clean-shaven with light, fair hair. The witness's account was consistent and detailed enough that investigators commissioned forensic artists to construct full-sized clay busts of both men. 3-dimensional sculpted heads built entirely from one teenager's memory. The busts still exist. Photographs of them are available online. They are unsettling objects. Life-sized, carefully rendered, and completely anonymous. They were distributed to newspapers and television stations, shown to the public, displayed widely. Nobody identified them. 2 faces with no names, and they have had no names for 47 years. Weeks after the murders, a man in a bar in Greenwood, Indiana, was talking too loudly about things that were not his to talk about. He was telling strangers that he had been involved in the burger chef killings. He was saying it with the carelessness of someone who believed themselves untouchable, or who had been drinking long enough that caution had temporarily abandoned him. Police found him. When they sat across from him, the story evaporated. He knew nothing. He had been exaggerating. He had said things he had no business saying. But the fear in the room was real, and frightened people give things away. He named a group of men who had been robbing fast food restaurants across Indiana for years. They had a specific and practiced method. Park behind the building near closing time, wait at the dumpsters, take whoever comes out to deal with the trash, force them into a vehicle, and drive. 2 of the men he named were later convicted and imprisoned for armed robberies of fast food restaurants. The method used in those crimes was identical to the burger chef attack in every meaningful detail. Identical method, different location, and no physical evidence connecting them to Crawfordsville Road, because that evidence had been cleaned away on Saturday morning. No arrests were made. The case continued without resolution. In 1998, 20 years after the murders, Indiana State Police Sergeant Stoney Vann was assigned to the burger chef homicides. He would remain on the case for 20 years. In a 2023 interview, Vann said, "I think about it often. I dream about it sometimes. This is the type of case that I will take to my grave." Those words carry the weight of 2 decades spent looking at photographs of 4 teenagers in fast food uniforms and being unable to put a name in front of a judge. Over those 20 years, Van developed a theory he considers credible and supported by what circumstantial evidence survived. A crew of 5, organized and experienced, had been running fast food robberies across Indiana throughout the 1970s. They worked in pairs, selected their targets carefully, and exploited the same vulnerability every time. The employee alone at the back of the building, in the dark, taking out the trash. The Speedway burger chef fit their method. But one variable had not been accounted for. Mark Flemmonds was not on the schedule. And when the crew came through that back door, Van believes one of the 4 teenagers recognized a face that could not afford to be recognized. That recognition, Van concluded, was why none of them were allowed to leave. 3 of the 5 men Stoney Van identified as part of the crew are now dead. One died of a heart attack, one by his own hand. One was murdered. 2 are believed to still be alive, living somewhere in Johnson County, Indiana, the same county where the property owner found 4 bodies in a clearing on a gray Sunday morning in November 1978. In 2018, 40 years after the murders, the community of Speedway raised enough money within 24 hours to plant 4 red oak trees at Leonard Park, one for each victim. A marble bench was placed facing the trees. Each carries a small plaque with a name and a few lines about a life cut short. The dedication was held on November 10th, 1 week before the 40th anniversary. Jayne Friedt, 20 years old. Danny Davis, 16. Ruth Ellen Shelton, 17. Mark Flemmonds, 16. Working a shift that was not his. None of them reached 21. The Indiana State Police say the case is open, active. They will not close it. But open is not the same as answered. 2 men are believed to still be living their lives in the county where those 4 teenagers were left in the dirt. 47 years of silence, 4 trees in a park, and a question that has never been given an answer.